Welcome, everyone. I'm Deborah Cunningham, and I'm the Senior Program Director at Primary Source. And we're really delighted that you've come today to learn about AI in the classroom, AI that goes beyond ChatGPT. We are fortunate to have Jennifer Hanson with us this evening. I know Jen from many years of working together. For years, she was our primary source librarian, almost a decade. And she also ran our website and pretty much everything IT at Primary Source. Because what we learned was that she was equally comfortable and adept in the world of tech and tech-based learning as she was in the world of books and bookish things. So that has continued. She's now the library director at St. John's High School in Shrewsbury and a regular presenter at conferences for both librarians and technologists. Most recently, she was the keynote speaker on AI literacy and school libraries for the New England Association of Independent School Librarians. So Jen is well versed in what we're going to be looking at tonight, and we could not think of anyone better to talk with teachers and share ideas and kind of facilitate a conversation about where we are in this new AI landscape that is upon us. So with that, I'll hand it over. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. To get started, since it's such a small group, I was hoping you would introduce yourselves. I frequently teach online courses, and it just makes the course feel a little cozier and more collegial if I know who's in the room. So if you don't mind, just name where you teach, what your role is, just so that we can kind of get an idea of who's attending and what your interest in the topic might be. So why don't we start? I'm just going to go down the list that I can see. So how about Mary? Would you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Mary Andrews. Sorry, I was having a little technical difficulty at the beginning, so I didn't hear the build up, but I'm the English director in Hingham K to 12. Thanks for hosting us.
Nice. And Maura.
Hi, I'm Maura McGill. She, hers. I'm one of the librarians at Brookline High School.
Nice. All right. And Kristen?
Hi, I'm Kristen Borges, Hamilton Wenham 6 through 12 Social Studies Curriculum Leader. Sorry, I'm trying to get my camera on, having a little tech difficulties right now.
No problem. Jillian.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for hosting this. I'm Jillian Jope. I'm also from Hingham High School. I'm an ELA teacher.
Okay. And Liz.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Walker. I run an academic support center at my middle school in Acton.
And Michael.
I'm Michael Lee. I am a high school history teacher at Winchester High.
Okay. And Molly, I know you just joined us. We were just doing introductions just to get an idea of who's in the room. Not sure if Molly's there. All right, we'll go to Shelly. Would you introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, I'm Shelley. Sorry, just got home. And I am a librarian at Brookline High School.
Okay. And El Francescon?
Hi, I'm Lisa Francescan. I'm also at Brookline High School and I'm the ed tech specialist.
Okay, nice. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Did anybody get a chance to look at that resource guide that we sent out ahead of time? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, we'll come back to that. I'll talk a little bit about it at the end. It's full of resources. It's kind of a bibliography for what I'm going to talk about tonight. But it also has a lot of curriculum and some professional development recommendations for, beyond this, if you want to take a course about AI, or if you want to do some more reading on artificial intelligence. So let me share my screen and get to the presentation. All right. So part of my interest in this, as a librarian, when ChatGPT came out in November of 2022, one of my friends was like, "You need to be on this." He was like, "This is going to change how our kids are doing research and writing." And I started looking into it and playing around with ChatGPT a little bit. And one of the things I started thinking about was information literacy and media literacy that I'm already teaching. And is there AI literacy? Has anyone talked yet about AI literacy? And in early 2023, there was very little out there about AI literacy. And so that was kind of where I started. And I found an article that I'm going to talk about today, and I started looking at competencies and what we could teach, what we could merge with already existing skills we're teaching in the classroom or in our libraries. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So the alternate title, just for a little humor, this could be our AI era. I think we're in our AI era. It's not going to go away. I used Dolly to create this AI generated image of Taylor Swift in a library, which came out pretty well at the time. Just to kind of ground us and make sure we're all on the same definition, thinking about what is artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, this is from MIT's Day of AI program, which I believe they started in 2021. It is a program made by people that makes computers do things that seem intelligent or smart in the same way that humans are intelligent. It's a very broad definition, but I think it's one that we can work with today when we're talking about artificial intelligence. So basically, computers doing things that humans can do. And some examples, I don't think this is surprising to anybody. If you've got Face ID on your phone, you're already using artificial intelligence. If you've got an Alexa or a Siri on your phone, Alexa or like a Google Home, those are artificial intelligence. We've all seen the Boston Dynamics robots that they look and act like dogs a little bit, that they can make decisions on their own. They can walk up and down stairs, move things around. Those can be examples of artificial intelligence. And then I have, again, another AI generated image. I asked for a black lab sitting in a window. This is from Canva. So that was, a tool that we use frequently for other things for education. Canva can now do a lot of AI art. And then in apps like Snapchat, we're seeing digital lenses and other things like that are doing face recognition and artificial intelligence. Also in Snapchat, we've got there's like an AI friend in Snapchat. I don't know about you, but when I talk to my students, a lot of them communicate with that AI buddy in Snapchat, which is quite interesting. So our kids are inundated with this. We are inundated with this. ChatGPT was new in 2022. It was a form of generative artificial intelligence, a chatbot that we had not really seen the likes of yet. But we had already been using artificial intelligence in our daily lives in quite a few ways. When we're talking about artificial intelligence, I really like this wheel from, again, this is from MIT's Day of AI and AI for K-12. They talk about 4 questions that we can ask about artificial intelligence. Can it perceive its environment? Can it learn from its environment? Does it interact with the environment? And can it make decisions? When we think about any of those 4 questions, we can start to discern what is and isn't artificial intelligence. It doesn't have to answer yes to all 4 of those questions. But if it answers yes to 1 or 2, again, depending on what it is, it could be artificial intelligence. And so when we think about AI literacy, again, I was thinking about this as, what do my students need to know? What do my teachers need to know about artificial intelligence? I think I need to be AI literate before I start teaching my teachers and my students. But what skills do I need to be teaching them? It's out there in the world. It's not going to go away. And what do I need to be teaching them? The best article that I found was this paper from Georgia Tech called "What is AI Literacy Competencies and Design Considerations" by Dury Long and Brian McGurko. And this was written in 2018. So it predates ChatGPT by about 4 years. I was really impressed that at that time they were already thinking about AI literacy. They were thinking about it for schools and for just the general public. And they laid it out as AI literacy is a set of competencies that enables individuals to critically evaluate AI technologies, communicate and collaborate effectively with AI, and use AI as a tool online, at home, and in the workplace. And when I read that definition, I went, oh, that's information literacy. Information literacy also involves critically thinking, communicating, and collaborating, and using tools effectively. So I felt like this was something that overlaps really nicely with skills that we might already be teaching. And they laid out 17 competencies. We are not talking about 17 competencies tonight. But if you're interested, on that resource guide that we sent you, their article is the very first link in the center of the homepage. And you can read through all 17 competencies that they've come up with. But I pulled out 5 competencies that I think are really important. Before we jump into those, though, I want to think about why AI literacy a little bit more broadly. I have this video. This is from The Daily Show from a couple of months ago. So let me play this for you. Oh, whoops.
Your fake Joe Biden robocall that tells New Hampshire voters not to vote. Your Chicago mayoral candidate glorifying police brutality. Your Donald Trump dropping by the neighborhood for a stew pan. Look how comfortable he seems. And as AI gets better and better, it's only going to make it more difficult to separate fact from fiction, which could be terrifying. Luckily, the people in charge of AI have told us that just like with the internet and social media, it's actually going to make everything much, much better.
This has the potential to make life much better. I think it's honestly a layup.
I hate to sound like utopic tech bro here, but the increase in quality of life that AI can deliver is extraordinary.
AI is the most profound technology humanity is working on, more profound than fire or electricity.
Yeah!
So I think one of the most important pieces of this clip, and this was a 15-minute clip, I just took a minute out of it, where he talks about recognizing fact from fiction. And I'll talk about this a little bit later too when we talk about ethics, but we saw a lot of AI-generated content in our most recent election. You saw the AI image of Trump with a group of Black men. In the primaries in New Hampshire, the Democratic candidate there that was running against Biden put out a robocall of Joe Biden. It was a fake Joe Biden voice, telling people not to vote and to wait until November to vote instead of voting in the primaries. So again, we see this just proliferating. And how do we tell what's AI generated and what's not? When it comes to identifying artificial intelligence and where people are using it, this is a chart from Pew Research Center. Less than half of Americans are aware of all 6 examples when they are using artificial intelligence. And this is things like fitness trackers, chatbots, product recommendations that you might see on Amazon or another shopping website, security cameras that are sending information, music playlist recommendations on YouTube and places like that, email services that are using AI to categorize spam, but also maybe make recommendations for how to write your email now. So these are adults that sometimes don't know that they are using artificial intelligence. And I think that's really important. This is a study from late 2022. But again, really important of why we should be teaching AI literacy skills. And then when we look at job postings, this is from Stanford University, the Artificial Intelligence Report from 2023. And these are, this is showing the chart of job postings that are requiring AI skills. So you can see the increase from 2020 up to 2022 of how many jobs in the United States are starting to require AI skills. In 2024, it went down a little bit, but they changed their metrics of what they were looking for. And so it wasn't quite a good comparison between 2023 and 2024. But anecdotally, students that I've taught who were graduating last year and going into the workforce, many of them were going into jobs that had to deal with AI. Whether it was selling a product that was using artificial intelligence, or it was that they were going to be using artificial intelligence in their job. So many students are graduating into a workforce that they need to understand and use artificial intelligence. I'm not saying at the K-12 level that we need to be teaching students, how to program it or design it or use, create it. But I think we need to start talking about it in a way that they're prepared for it when they get to college and when they get into the workforce. This is a spectrum of Midjourney illustrations. So you can see in February 2022, asking for an image of Harry Potter up to December of 2023, and it looks like Daniel Radcliffe. And just that progression of how good AI generated art has become. And in a very short time, in about a year and a half, just how good that art became. And again, what kind of implications does this have for both creative works, but also how do we recognize something that is AI generated or not? Early on, it was, does the person have 6 fingers? AI was really terrible at hands and extremities, but it's getting better. So we can't always rely on little anomalies like that anymore. In the government field, in 2023, Representative Lisa Blunt Rochester and Representative Larry Buckshon of Indiana, this was a bipartisan bill that they put out to the House of Representatives, the Artificial Intelligence Literacy Act. It was intended to amend the Digital Equity Act and codify AI literacy as a digital literacy. This was very much aimed at schools and nonprofits, libraries, and colleges. They wanted to highlight the importance of AI literacy and digital safety. And it would have made grants available for schools and community colleges and nonprofits and libraries. It did not go anywhere in the House. Lisa Blunt Rochester was just elected to the Senate, and Buckshon retired. So I think this bill, as it was proposed, is probably dead. But there is a bipartisan committee in Congress that has it's an artificial intelligence bipartisan task force that is working on artificial intelligence policy at the national level. Again, not sure where that's going to go. Yes, I think it was just yesterday, the person who has been nominated to be the head of the EPA talked about wanting to be, the United States being a leader in artificial intelligence. Again, I don't know quite what that means or where that's going to go, but at the national level, there is an AI.gov website. The Biden administration has done a lot of work around thinking about policy and what that means for artificial intelligence. So if you're interested, you could visit AI.gov and kind of see what that work has been. So the AI literacy competencies that I've kind of pulled out and have thought about, how could we incorporate these into schools? They are to recognize AI, recognizing AI's strengths and weaknesses, the human role in AI, learning from data, and ethics of AI. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those competencies and how or where we can teach them, how I've tried to incorporate them into some of my teaching. And before I start this part, I should say I teach a 7th grade STEM class, and then I also teach 7th through 12th grade information literacy and research skills. So I've been incorporating some AI literacy skills where I can when I see those classes. And in my STEM class, I do a whole AI unit. So recognizing AI, this is distinguishing between technology that does and does not use AI. So kind of going back to the beginning of this presentation where we looked at the Boston Dynamics dogs and the Face ID, being able to recognize when you're using artificial intelligence and when you're not. Most students don't realize that they're using it. When you tell 7th graders, you know, those phones you've got in your bags, if you're using Face ID, that's artificial intelligence. They're usually pretty surprised by that. I think high school students recognize it a little bit more. But most students, if you were to say AI to them, are thinking ChatGPT. But again, we're using it in so many different places. Going back to that Pew Research chart, you know, it's in our fitness trackers, it's in our Google Docs. If you're using Grammarly at your school, it's in Grammarly. So again, we're surrounded by it, whether we realize it or not. With my classes, I talk a little bit about, you know, what is and isn't artificial intelligence. MIT has a really great curriculum with a slideshow looking at different artifacts, things like toasters, and, you know, some robots are artificial intelligence, other robots aren't. When we apply those 4 questions, if they can make decisions or interact with their environment, or if they're responding to their environment, then you've got a robot that's using artificial intelligence. But if you just have a robot that's being driven by remote control, not necessarily. So, you know, again, just talking about what are those things that we're using. One of the artifacts that they use in their slideshow are the sliding glass doors, like at a supermarket. And that's always an interesting question with or discussion with students, because they'll say, some will say yes and some will say no, because it can perceive its environment and it can make the decision to open or close, but really it's based on a sensor, or if it hits a human, it's going to open back up. It's not making decisions necessarily on its own or changing towards its environment. So again, thinking about what's maybe based on a sensor versus something that's making a decision on its own.
Jen, can I interrupt you just for a moment? We have a question
Sure.
whether you will be making the slides available, which, if it's all right with you, I'm happy to share the slides. Everyone should know that we're recording this, and the recording will be available afterward.
Yes, and we can make the slides available.
Okay, sure. We'll send those out with the recording. Thanks, Jen. And do you want people to raise their hands if they have a question? Post in the chat box, either or?
They can post in the chat box and you can interrupt me like you did. That's totally fine.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And we're also going to have time for Q&A at the end. So if there's something, but feel free to stop me at any time. So when we think about AI strengths and weaknesses, this competency is thinking about identifying problems where AI excels and what's more challenging for artificial intelligence. I think a lot about generative AI in this case. So ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, what are they really good at and what should we use for human skills? This also gets a little bit into ethics when you think about, like, what are they good at? They might be great at writing a paper, but ethically, should we be doing that? ChatGPT, for example, is known to hallucinate. If you ask it, you know, to cite its sources, it can't always do that well. It sometimes, you know, gives you a book title, but has the wrong author with it, or will give you an article title that doesn't exist, even though the journal it's citing it from might be real. So, you know, they have the tendency, there's that hallucination. And again, like, I really like artificial intelligence. I teach my kids when I do research classes now. We use it to brainstorm our topics. we can narrow in on a topic so much more quickly now. And that was kind of a pain point when we did research. What's going to be my topic? They were going really, really broad, like World War II. Well, you got to write a 6 to 8 page paper. We can't write a 6 to 8 page paper on World War II. So using something like ChatGPT or Gemini, we can give it prompts and start to narrow in on a topic pretty easily. And we can get some keywords from that. And I really like it for those purposes. But again, I think we have to talk about what is it not great at? Where is it weak? Where is it just ethically something that we shouldn't be using? The human role in AI. So humans are training artificial intelligence. These generative AI chatbots are being trained by humans. So they might, OpenAI might scrape the internet and get a bunch of data and kind of dump it into a machine. And that's going to be that's a large language model. And what the artificial intelligence is doing is just recognizing words, like a percentage of times a certain word comes after another word. So it's not really thinking. It is just playing percentages of word recognition. And then humans are going in and giving it more training and teaching it, how to do a little bit more so-called thinking. But this is where we get a lot of bias introduced into artificial intelligence. This is where, if you're talking about security cameras, for example, that, early on, security cameras had a really hard time recognizing race, for example. So we were seeing a lot of bias in who was being recognized on a security camera. So, how are humans interacting with artificial intelligence to train it? And what does that mean for the output that we might be getting? And I think it's really important that students understand this. I talk about this a little bit with my 7th graders, not a whole lot because they're a little young for this, but we do talk about introducing bias and how that comes into our generative artificial intelligence. And then learning from data, recognizing that computers are learning from us. For example, if you've got an Alexa in your house, Alexa starts to recognize your habits, what your grocery list might be, or what music you might want to listen to. They've talked about ChatGPT, for example, starts to have a little bit of a memory. They've worked on that of, how are you giving it prompts and what questions are you asking it and how do you refine those prompts? So again, what are we training the data to do? When we interact with artificial intelligence like that, we are becoming trainers, whether we realize it or not. One of the ways I've taught this is Google Quick Draw, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And it's a really great tool for teaching kids how artificial intelligence, how neural networks are learning from us. So Quick Draw asks you, it gives you 6 prompts. It'll say something like draw a tennis racket. And you get, you'll start drawing it with your keypad, and within a few keystrokes, it will recognize what you're drawing. And sometimes it won't recognize what you draw, but even like I'm a horrible artist. It can recognize what I'm drawing because it's pulling from 50 million other images. And it's taking all of the data that I'm putting in there and it's learning from me. So I show my students, how an artificial intelligence model can learn from our work. Same with, when we use, like I said, ChatGPT or something like that, it might be learning, how we ask prompts and what we're asking it to do. And then the ethics. So I'm going to spend a lot more time on ethics here. I think this is a big one. I think this is one that all of us should be teaching. Identifying and describing the key ethical issues around artificial intelligence. And that can be everything from privacy, bias, misinformation, transparency, accountability. The generative AI tools that we have, things like Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, they're not very transparent about where they get their data from. They're private companies. So no one's really holding them accountable to, where is this information coming from? Back in, I think it was April or May, Google scraped all of YouTube. So anything that had like transcripts on YouTube, Google scraped it and was dumping it into its Gemini chatbot. YouTube didn't know that this was happening. YouTube sued them. But if you start to think about like how many of your students have YouTube channels and are creating stuff, who's credible, who is creating content, where is that content coming from, and what's getting dumped into these AI models. Google started scraping any publicly available Google Docs. Again, we never got a notification about that, right? If you've got Google Docs and you have any of yours publicly available, you probably were not aware that they had been scraped and used in a chatbot. So that transparency piece and accountability piece, I think, is really huge. Misinformation, as I mentioned at the beginning, that Jon Stewart clip, we were surrounded by misinformation in the last few months, and it worked very well. Privacy, what is artificial intelligence learning from us if we've got Face ID, if we have Alexa, things like that in our homes, where is our privacy? There's a really great book, and I should have looked it up. I'm drawing a blank on it now, but it's about Face ID and face recognition and how that got developed, and basically how they were scraping Facebook for faces. So all of your pictures on Facebook, your profile pictures, everything like that on Facebook was getting scraped and used for Face ID. And I'll look that up towards the end and give you the title of it. But privacy is a really big issue. And, that also goes to what are we using in the classroom with our students and protecting their privacy? What tools are we using so that we're not giving away our student data? So when we think about ethics, again, these 4 pieces, I think, very much pertain to schools: copyright, misinformation, plagiarism, privacy. How are we teaching our students all about this? A lot of this overlaps, again, with information literacy that we might be teaching, media literacy that we might be teaching. I know English teachers, we've got several English teachers on here tonight. You're probably very concerned about plagiarism because it is so easy for your students to just run a prompt through a chatbot and get a paper. So, how do we deal with these things, these issues in light of the artificial intelligence that's available today? And, where is it going? It's only getting better. There's a website called Generative AI Lawsuits. This is the October 2024 update. And you can kind of see, just looking through here, some of the legal cases that are coming out of artificial intelligence. You've seen a lot of novelists, comedians, artists sue OpenAI or Google for scanning and for scraping their books and their materials, their shows. They haven't been very successful in court. The lawsuits that were, novelists saying my books were scraped and that, infringes on my copyright. Judges have come back and said, well, but generative AI doesn't plop them out as a full text. So that's fair use. It's getting your voice, or it's getting a piece of your work. It's not getting the entirety of your work. So, it's been very interesting how some of those cases have started to turn out. You've got, again, I mentioned YouTube sued Google for scraping all of its data unknowingly. You have other, a lot of copyright infringement. I think, I don't know if we're going to see it soon. I think we should, but I don't know if we will. But, an update to copyright law and what that means for artificial intelligence. I think that's going to be very, very important in the next few years as far as, where this goes from a copyright perspective. is AI a creator? Some cases have come down as a yes and some as a no. So just to give you an idea of, again, this plays into the ethics, the copyright of it, and what all is going on. There's a lot behind the scenes, a lot of lawsuits happening with artificial intelligence, especially the generative AI, those chatbots. As I've mentioned a couple of times, the misinformation that was out there started very early. It started, this goes back to, I think, 2023. This was a New York Times article of news websites started popping up, and they were called things like the DC Weekly, and they looked, DC Weekly sounds like it could be a DC news website, but they had ties to Russia. They were combinations of real news articles and AI generated news articles. And a lot of the articles were disseminated through sites like Twitter. And so then you would go to the website, and it makes it very hard to tell when it's a combination of real and AI, what's real on the website and what's not. And these looked like real websites. These looked like legit. They sounded like legit websites. And so, this was, again, you had Russian, interference basically of spreading false and misleading narratives. And this happened in the lead up to the election and then all through the election of AI generated images, AI generated articles that were coming out, and just being sprinkled in with our real news. And again, nobody knows the difference. And unless you're pointing it out, it's hard, and it's really hard to know when you're looking at something that's a piece of misinformation. And this is something I try to teach my students in those research skills and information literacy classes. We look at sites like All Sides that has the media bias chart, and we talk about like what are credible news organizations. We talk about when you come across something that sounds too good to be true, we talk about confirmation bias and what that is, and how to kind of check yourself, and double check, corroborate your information before you're disseminating it. When we think about plagiarism, Ditch That Textbook has done a lot of really good work on thinking about what is plagiarism with mostly generative AI with the chatbots, and what constitutes cheating and what doesn't. This started as it was a spectrum of 6 items, and then he expanded it to a spectrum of 12. And you've got here at the bottom of like no cheating, where the student does all their work without any assistance from artificial intelligence and possibly even the internet, all the way up to artificial intelligence has written everything. And then you've got this spectrum in the middle, and what do we consider cheating and what do we not? And I think this is where schools are working on this, right? As teachers, we're thinking about, in our classrooms, when I do a final end of the year project with my 7th graders, I tell them they are not allowed to use artificial intelligence at all, like no chatbot. I'm very clear on that they cannot create their slides or their content with artificial intelligence. I do that because they're 7th graders, and I don't think that they can really yet discern what is an ethical use and an unethical use. They're still kind of learning that. And so I just kind of have to take a hard line on that. If I'm working with sophomores, for example, when we do AP European history papers, that's where we use it for some brainstorming of topics. And then I make it very clear that that's where we're going to leave our chatbot, and we're going to do the rest of the work on our own. We're going to do our research using databases, and I talk about why we use databases, and why we're going to write the paper on our own. I know that cheating is happening. Stakes are high, grades are high, the grade pressure is high, and students are running their papers through ChatGPT and getting feedback on it. They're running, they're starting ChatGPT with like, write me a 5-paragraph essay, and then they're expanding on that. And I think we just have to be really clear what we see as cheating and what we don't. And again, I think we also have to mix that with where are we going to use generative AI? It can be great for kids with learning disabilities. We can level texts with it. We can do some really great work with it. But again, thinking about the spectrum, what are we going to consider cheating and what are we not? And again, I think it's really important that schools have a policy. We have some teachers from Hingham. There's the lawsuit in Hingham right now of parents suing the school district because their child got in trouble for using artificial intelligence. And what they're citing is, well, there was no policy, there was no rule that he couldn't, and so he did. And he shouldn't get in trouble for that. I'm shocked that there's a lawsuit about that. I'm very interested in that. That parents would go to that level to sue a school district over something like that. But again, I think that's something we need to be watching and thinking about. So I've talked about this a little bit along the way. So thinking about AI literacy in the classroom and how do we design lessons to foster AI literacy? Again, I think we can do that through awareness of what is artificial intelligence, where are we using it, where are we seeing it in our daily lives. I think it's great maybe as a editing and a feedback partner. I would never say a student should fully write a paper with it, but can they use it? Can they use Grammarly to edit the paper and get feedback on the paper? Maybe that's something, I feel like that's something that has to be guided with the teacher of how we're going to use artificial intelligence in the classroom and not just go edit your paper with AI, or just letting students do it on their own and figuring it out. I think that's something that has to be a guided practice. Again, we need to be teaching our students how to ethically and effectively do this. I think we also need to be talking about Google versus chatbots. And I would also add in here like library databases, that research component. I hear a lot of students say like, oh, I did my research with ChatGPT, and I'm horrified because you don't know where any of that information came from. It's not citing its sources. Gemini kind of cites its sources, but they're not really great, credible sources. And it's so different than doing a Google search where all we get are sources and then we have to synthesize that information. And so I'm trying to teach my students that there's a difference between Google and a generative AI chatbot, and a database. So I think that's a place that we can start as well, to teach them those differences. Again, these are very kind of basic ways that we can start to incorporate it, but I think ways that could be very effective to start teaching our students about artificial intelligence. When we think about tools for students, these are some that I've used. Google Quick Draw, which I mentioned at the beginning, is here at the top right. And again, that's where it prompts you for a writing or a drawing, and then it's incorporating all of your drawings into its network, into its model. The bottom left where it says, is this a fish? This is code.org. They've got some really great lessons on artificial intelligence. And I used this specific one is talking about how to train a large language model. So how are we training models? It actually gets into, you start off with like just basic, is it a fish or is it like trash? It shows you different pictures. And then it actually, in the different levels that you work through, it gets into how you can introduce bias into your models by, does the fish look angry, or is you're doing fish of certain colors? And again, these colors are purple and green, so it's very, kind of like safe to talk about. But if we were to take that and apply it to thinking about human beings, what does that start to mean? If we think like what kind of a face looks angry, or what kind of a person looks angry, and assigning race or gender to that. So again, that's code.org. You can sign up for a code.org account for free. You can create classes for your students. I have found that to be a really great way to introduce that. I don't use their whole curriculum unit. I just kind of pick and choose what I want to use. And then on the right, the bottom right here, this is Canva's AI art generation. And again, that's, it's available for students. I think it's something that we would need to think about. If I'm the art teacher, I probably don't want to be using that. But if I'm, an English teacher and they're creating a PowerPoint, is AI text to image generation something that I might want to use? I didn't talk about citation. All of the APA, MLA, Chicago style, all now have guidelines for citation. I think that goes with plagiarism. But there's now guidelines for citing how you're using your sources if you're using generative chatbots or text to image kinds of generators. For teachers, I really like Magic School AI. There's a lot that you can use here. And part of the reason I picked Magic School AI, a lot of the teacher products are paid for products. This is not, our ed tech tools that were free for so long. Artificial intelligence is really expensive to create. Things, Khan Academy has the Khan Academy AI, Khanmigo, I think is what it's called. That's like $20 or $25 a month. So they're kind of cost prohibitive, I feel like, in a way, for schools and for teachers. But Magic School AI has a free version. And again, it's got an image generator. You can level texts here. You can create presentations. You can create lesson plans. I think there's a lot of ways that as a teacher, we can use this. Again, I think we have to think of the ethics of it. Like report card comments. I had a principal asking me a few weeks ago about, I want to show my teachers how to use AI to write report card comments. And I was like, how are you thinking about that from like an ethical standpoint of, is it authentic if you're using artificial intelligence to write it instead of your own writing? Or maybe could they write it on their own first and then maybe put it through AI for like feedback or comments on their writing? But again, I think there's a lot there that we need to think about from an ethical standpoint. And then also for teachers, I've mentioned a few times, I really love the Day of AI curriculum from MIT. These are just a few of the modules that they have. You can sign up with an email address and access all of their materials for free. They've got like lesson plans. They have slideshows that you can download. I've taken their slideshows and then I just kind of modify them to fit my own needs. I pick and choose the slides I want to use. And that's been a really great way to bring artificial intelligence teaching into my classroom. Their lessons, you can do them as one-offs or you could do it as a whole unit. You can see here, they kind of range in age. They've got everything from elementary to high school age appropriateness. And they've been really thoughtful about how they're teaching about artificial intelligence. There's also some other curriculum on the resource guide. I'm going to jump to the resource guide now. Here we go. So on this resource guide, on the right-hand side, there's classroom resources, and these are all lesson plans that you can use. So like TED Ed has some great lessons. AI for All is another great source in addition to MIT. I have looked at this, the craft lessons from Stanford. I think they'd be better off with high school students. They didn't quite fit for 7th grade. They were a little too advanced. But if you're teaching high school, I think those are really great resources. And then again, Ditch That Textbook. And I also have the Ditch That Textbook book over here, the AI for Educators, that is really good. So those are some great resources that you could use in the classroom. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. And then you've also got Canva. If, again, we can get Canva for Educator access and get free access for Canva. They've got Magic Studio, Magic Write, Magic Design, the AI image generator. I have played around with this a little bit. I really like some of the Magic Write and the design. You could design a whole PowerPoint with Canva if you wanted to. I've played with it. I haven't actually used anything that it designed. But it is something that, you could put a prompt in and get a whole slideshow back. But again, if we're thinking about free tools that are available, Canva is another really great one for teachers that you could use. And then some more resources, some thought leaders that I have found really helpful. Ethan Mollick at the Wharton School of Business. He wrote a book that was just published earlier this summer called Co-Intelligence. It's a short, it was like a 5-hour audiobook, but he does a lot of thinking about generative AI, especially. He has incorporated it into his classes at Penn. And again, these are graduate students that he's incorporating it with. So I don't think the way that he's incorporating it is necessarily something we need to bring into K-12, but I do think it's thinking about what our students might be asked to do at the college and graduate level. How can we prepare them for that so that they've got a base of vocabulary, of literacy around artificial intelligence, so that when they're asked to use it more, they're ready. He really, one of the comments that he made that I really like is, with generative AI available as a tool to students, he has higher expectations of his students now. The idea that they can brainstorm with it, that they can start, an iteration process with it. He's got higher expectations of his students. And I think that's really interesting to think about. When I do that brainstorming activity with my students in our research class, I tell them that, I think your teacher should have higher expectations of the projects that you're going to turn out, of the topics that you're going to research, because you had this big start, like a big prompt. You didn't spend weeks, spinning on a topic and trying to narrow it down. We did it in about 15 minutes. Greg Kolowiak, who's local here in Massachusetts, he's got a really great AI for Educators course. And when I took it, I think it was like a $35 or $70 course. So it's very accessible. It's not, hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars that you're putting out. But it's something that's really accessible, I think, for all educators to think about. Tori Trust is at the College of Education at UMass Amherst. She does a lot of really great work thinking about the ethics and privacy around artificial intelligence. So if you're interested in those topics specifically a little bit more, she's got a lot of great PowerPoints online and presentations that she's done. And then that curriculum that I just mentioned, MIT, AI for All, and Stanford, I think are putting out some really great stuff that's very accessible for teachers. That resource guide, I highly encourage you to take a look at that if you haven't already. I've got some podcasts on there, some videos on there. And again, there's some professional development recommendations for you, and some book recommendations as well. There's my email address. If you have more questions, I've seen a couple of questions possibly coming up in the chat bot. So we can do some Q&A if you have questions that you'd like to talk about.
Jen, I also wonder if we might want to give people a chance to talk about if any of them had a chance to explore a particular resource and had thoughts on it. This would be a great time to hear from people about what they thought and what they saw.
Yeah, definitely. And
Jen,
maybe, and also like what's going on in your districts around artificial intelligence.
I agree with you, Jen, that I had checked out the Stanford resource and how helpful it is for the high school, looking at the high school lens. And I just thought that object lesson of the New York Times case, and because so many, we're just troubleshooting these cases for teachers left and right, as we know, and the full-time Nancy Drew job to figure out what's going on with essays. But so often we hear that students really don't understand that it can be a type of plagiarism and that those ways that it shows so clearly the lift from the New York Times articles, and even the complexity over the court case of saying, if you're saying it's open AI, but then why did you pay AP to have a license with them?
Mm-hmm.
I just think that gets at a really interesting, sort of sophisticated piece of the discussion that is hard for students to deny, that there's an element of work being lifted and not cited.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Right. And we don't, again, we don't know when we are looking at something on ChatGPT where it's coming from. I put in a prompt today and then I did a Google search and I was like, oh, this article I just found on Google is almost exactly like what ChatGPT just gave me. So, I'm like, all right, it's probably lifted from there. I think about it too, kind of like Wikipedia. Like when Wikipedia came out, I think there's some good ways to use Wikipedia. Every student I talk to, every student knows you do not use Wikipedia as a research source. You don't cite it, you don't use it. And they know the reasons why. So I think that's where we kind of have to start with artificial intelligence and with these generative AI chatbots of, you understand that about Wikipedia. Let's apply that to a generative chatbot and think about where that information is coming from. Yeah, Kristen.
Hi, just a couple of things with the sources that you mentioned. So I reiterate what you said about Greg's course. I took that this summer, and then last year he's got 2 different versions of it.
Mm-hmm.
Also for ChatGPT with citations, Perplexity. I don't know if you've played with that at
Mm-hmm.
all, but it's they're not high quality sources always because they're pulling from the internet, but they are giving you citations of where the information comes from. And I think the thing that's been most helpful for me with working with students with AI is something that I learned from Greg's class about the amount of energy that you're expending when you're using a ChatGPT. And just like Matt does in the Ditch That textbook, have that continuum. He does it as a battery, and when you're exerting more energy of what you're inputting into the AI chatbot, your battery is being expended because you're really using it as a thought partner versus when you're just asking it to produce for you. You're not expending
Mm-hmm.
any energy. And that is something that has really worked with my students, showing them that continuum about how much they're using it and how much energy they're putting into it versus the products that they're getting out. And when they are using it as a thought partner, there can be some really rich experience. So just a short plug on that.
Yeah, that's great.
I forget what the other source is that I looked at, but it had the ethical cards, like an ethical flashcard sort of, and it was getting into things that I thought was really interesting and things that would make students go a little bit deeper on things like if you're designing a self-driving car, do you put into part of that programming that that the car should actually calculate something like the trolley car dilemma when it's deciding if it's about to crash into another car that has more people and you only have one person, like those sort of I thought it was really I thought it was interesting, the scenarios that it came up with to get students think a little bit deeper about the ethical pieces involved in AI.
Yeah. And I have to say, I debated with my 7th graders whether or not to get into I was going to do an ethics lesson. I ended up not, because they're really young. Like they're younger 7th graders than they used to be, if that makes any sense. And I just didn't think that they could handle this conversation about ethics. I would definitely do it at the high school level, though. I think they would be primed for it. And my class is different this year. I think my class could actually handle an ethics conversation this year. So I might go ahead and do that with them.
I would support the idea of having the ethics discussion in class. Like in our department, we do have a shared lesson that all of us roll out in our ELA classes, and it includes that discussion, and sort of it helps to hear from the kids where their line in the sand is as far as what they think is an ethical use of it, and then trying to kind of explicitly explain to them where the problems are, and like even just differentiating between Google as a search tool versus a chatbot, and what kind of engagement you have with those two different resources, I think is so valuable. And I was wondering a little bit, just a separate question. I was sort of wondering what kinds of resources or tools that you've used that have to do with like differentiating readings. Like I know we've used Diffit in the past,
Yes.
but I was just wondering if there are other resources that you'd recommend.
I've used Diffit and I really like it. So Magic School AI does have a text leveler. I haven't tried it out, but I think that could also be a really good source because Diffit, like right now I have a 3-month free account with Diffit, and sometimes like it kind of comes and goes as to whether or not it's free. But I really liked Diffit, and I recommended it to a couple of teachers at my school who were asking me for some differentiation materials or tools, and they really liked it as well.
Okay. I also just had one follow-up question. It's just a little bit related on a different topic. I definitely struggle with the kids navigating some of like the built-in functionality to a lot of the educational resources now, like Grammarly, where it's different with the squiggles of noticing where there's errors versus that of, can I help you rewrite this sentence? Can I help you come up with a better idea for your essay? And like helping them navigate those sort of built-in tools has been tricky because it's so easy to click that, and it's so easy to sort of just fall into that trap. I've definitely struggled with that, and even things like Padlet. I bought a subscription for my own classes, and they just recently added the AI feature for the kids' user end. And I'm so frustrated with them because I'm like, I just paid for this and I didn't consent to this kind of technology. So
right.
There's those pieces. I don't know if you have any sort of thoughts or guidance on helping kids navigate the function of these tools.
Yeah, I haven't. I've been thinking a lot about Grammarly because it's changed so much, I would say, in just the past 6 months. That, before it was kind of like, let me run my paper through here and it'll check my grammar. And now it's like, let me write your paper for you. So I think that's something like we have it integrated into our Google Docs. So, and that's something I think that my school has to start thinking about of like, is this still a tool that we want to have? Yeah, I haven't quite gotten to that point with them of, how are you using these tools? One of the things I've been thinking about is like a lot of the library databases are starting, like if you use JSTOR, they've got a beta AI tool that I think we're going to see rolled out in a little while that summarizes articles, which is great. Like an article summary in JSTOR is awesome because JSTOR articles are long. But again, like how are students going to be using that? Are they going to be citing something that they didn't actually read because they got a summary of it? I think that's a little tricky with how we help them navigate that. Yeah, I haven't quite gotten there yet.
Thank you.
Jen, there are a couple of comments in the chat if you want to just take a peek over there. One about administrators making policies. And if anyone wants to comment on whether their schools have gotten this far in terms of making policies, looks like Hingham has done quite a bit. Is that before or after the lawsuit? Is that post lawsuit? No.
Oh, there was one.
It's yes and no. Mary, do you want to take that?
I'm sorry. I'm like managing people driving to play practice and all the things. Sorry. So yes, the English department did have one before in August of 2023. That's where things get complicated because this happened in not an English class. But prior to that, in the student handbook, it was just sort of a blanket comment about plagiarism. And there was an addition to in the student handbook made this summer to include general AI language under that policy, under that broader academic integrity language in the handbook. But now every discipline has a version of the English department's policy for their own department too. That's on all class syllabi and policies.
Nice. Yeah, does anybody else, do any of your districts have policies in place yet?
We have, it's up to each individual teacher. Some of the departments have policies, but they're very kind of loosey-goosey. So really it's up to the classroom teachers, but it's very confusing for the students and some of the teachers, really. So hopefully we will have one. I know Newton Public Schools has a good policy that I looked at online. But Brookline doesn't have one yet.
Winchester, I don't think has anything formal. I mean, we kind of have our own thing we can put in, but we did get this email out at the beginning of the year about how we weren't supposed to call things a policy because they hadn't come up with a policy, both for teachers or students. So it was a little like you're kind of on your own, and it seems like they are, kind of waiting to see when I think something's going to force them to make something more formal.
Yeah, I was just on a meeting yesterday. I think my school is going to go to a handbook policy that will cover everything. And then it sounds like we might go to department policies after that. That's kind of what we're working towards.
That's what we have. We have department policies, and it's explicit in our course syllabi that students aren't allowed to use it unless it's been explicitly used for an assignment or an assessment. So it's got to be the teacher permissions. And so when people are using it, they're making it very clear to the students, this is a time when you can use it.
Yep.
One other thing I just want to add is that the resources from MIT, one of the big standouts for me was an article that Justin Reich and co-authors wrote, where they're talking about like reframing the way that we talk about the use of AI, and not, looking at it as like how are students going to use it to, cheat or plagiarize, but how is this technology bypassing productive thinking? And I thought that was really powerful because that goes back to the onus of the amount of energy that a student might be putting into AI to get something very productive out of it, in the way that they're prompting it to ask questions, or they're asking questions of the chat to really extend and deepen their thinking.
I thought the bypass productive thinking phrasing really was helpful too. That drew a nice distinction. The other thing that I think is interesting is that only about 50% of state education departments have given guidance, and Massachusetts isn't one yet. And it will be interesting to see when and if that happens from DESE.
What concerns me is I see a lot of students using it at school, and the students who do well in school are the ones who are using it quite cleverly. So it's very hard to detect. And I see a bigger gap between the quality of work. And I know it's because those students are using AI, not necessarily plagiarizing everything, but they're using it to help them write a better paper or produce better research. Whereas other students just have no idea about how to use it. So I really think we have to educate all students, because otherwise there's going to be a bigger and bigger gap between the quality of work. I don't know. That's just one of my concerns.
Yeah. Yeah, I had some students sitting in the library one day, and our classes, the way our classes are leveled, they're the level 2, which is the lowest level. And they were like, oh, I just ran my paper through ChatGPT. And I was like, I did not hear that. I don't know if your teacher allows it. And I was kind of like, ooh, that's an interesting, but for that student, like they struggle to write, they struggle to read. it's probably a really great tool for them to get some feedback from ChatGPT on a paper. But again, not knowing what the teacher was going to allow, I didn't want to step in and be like, "You sure about that?" But yeah, it's happening a lot, and we're also hearing for the higher, like the AP students, we're hearing a lot of like it's a competitive edge. Like I'm going to lose a competitive edge to get into college if I don't use it. And or at least that's the perspective. I don't know if that's true, but that's the kids' perspective of, I have to use it so that I have this competitive edge. And that's a little scary.
You also make me think of the way that my thinking has evolved around it. When it first came out, I was looking at it as a way that it might democratize or level the field for a lot of students who might not have access to private tutors or, outside supports, and that AI could maybe step in as like kind of that like study buddy in some kinds of ways. But now with AI being monetized in so many ways, it like that's just gone in 1 year, that's gone out the window, that the students who do have the access to means to be able to pay the $25 per month for some of these services are going to have a greater advantage to somebody who might be limited to the free version of a ChatGPT where you put 10 things in and you're shut down for the day. So that just 1 year, it's really my thinking has shaped on it, has evolved on it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Any other questions or comments?
Well,
So
we've covered a lot of territory.
yeah. So we will make the slides available. I'll send that link to Deb tomorrow morning. And yeah, thank you. And you've got that resource guide if you want to reference that. Oh, the book, hold on. Let me find the name of that book I mentioned.
This is the Face ID.
The Faith, it's something like Your Face Belongs to Us. That's it. Your Face Belongs to Us. It's a really great book. I highly recommend it. That it talks just all about how Face ID came into being. It'll also make you just kind of always want to cover your face everywhere you go. Cancel the Facebook account, cancel everything.
I'm just envisioning all the cameras going off all of a sudden. Jen, you are a marvel as always. Your curiosity and interest in experimenting with all of this is inspirational, and it's fun to hear about what you're thinking about and what everyone is thinking about in terms of the ethical issues and helping students navigate these powerful and ever-changing tools. So I've learned so much just hearing from all of you, and I hope it's been beneficial to you to share with each other. We'll get the recording and the slide deck out to you, so perhaps you can do a little bit of sharing of what you've heard with your own departments. I know there are always people in schools who are more interested in these issues and a little more reluctant. So paving the way and getting folks thinking about some of these things, I think, is a real service that you can do for your schools. So Jen, I want to give you the last word if you have any parting thought, and then we'll say goodnight.
I think just keep doing the good work. It sounds like all of you are being very thoughtful about this and doing really good work around, how do we incorporate it and teach with it. Just keep doing that. I think it's important. I think this is that new skill that, we had Google and Wikipedia, things that kind of revolutionized education in some way. I think this is that next thing that's really going to change education and the way we think about it and teach. So keep doing it.
Great. Thank you,
Thank
Jen.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful.
Sure
Thank
thing.
you.
Have a good night.